There can be no gainsaying that on quite a number of fronts, Nigeria in particular and Africa in general has not done very well. And this is not about the current government. It's a trend that has been with us for a very long time, and I doubt that it will disappear. There's a magic wand that will just make everything disappear at once. So to answer your question directly, there is room for substantial improvement in the state of affairs in these areas that you have mentioned. Let me say by way of a prescription that Mr. President must go the next logical step after this. You see, we live in a world of region. In fact, in a sense, the G20 itself is a regional organization. Now, in this regional organization, however, the interests are not homogeneous. These members, these 20 countries, 19, AU and the EU are regional bodies. They will, after this session, after the G20, all dissolve back into other multilateral organizations and institutions where the agenda may not necessarily be consistent with what Africa and Nigeria in particular needs at this point in time. So the next step forward that I will suggest and strongly recommend to Mr. President and his team is that we need to begin to also look inwards. There is a need to establish independent, sustainable engines of growth and development that is within at least a substantial control of Nigeria and its allies on the continent. And this is why the presence of the AU in the G20 is also critical. Nigeria, as Dr. Male mentioned, is a very important member of the G20 and, of course, of the AU. We need to go back and look at arrangements like the African Continental Free Trade Area at the continental level and the other regional building blocks and begin to tackle these issues, these ones that you have mentioned, along with many, many others. There should be specialized templates to address our peculiarities because 50, 60 years of experimenting with received wisdom and models from the North has not gotten us anywhere. I know that the bulk of the responsibility stops at the national table. I said that before, and when your co-moderator made that point by way of a critique of my position, which I appreciate, is telling me what I have already said, which is that we have the onus lies on us to rediscover and move forward to address those gaps and deficits at the level of the national or, if you like, domestic political economies. But as somebody who is an expert with a focus on the international, I am saying that there is a need to strategize in such a manner that the efforts at the domestic levels, however the shortcomings, will find necessary complements at the international. So regional and continental arrangements are very key here. Finally, let me say, since we are talking about investment, that we must begin to also query the kinds of investments that we attract. More often than not, you'll find out that these regions and countries that have broken through, they did that precisely because they laid out the terms and conditions upon which investment will operate in their immediate climes. I think that that gap is missing more often than not in our own case and in the case of Africa as a whole. And that's why I'm very excited that the Honorable Minister, take us through some of the steps that we are to expect going forward. And I am sure, given the caliber of the eminent personalities on the livestock programs and strategies of the federal government, we will begin to inculcate these things. But we need to widen the base. For example, this government has established a Ministry of Marine and the Blue Economy. Now, the whole world is going towards the maritime sector. What are the character and nature of the investment that we are attracting into that sector? These new sectors and emerging areas are the ones that are capable of pulling us out of poverty the way that the traditional and conventional sectors that we have been toying with over these past 50, 60 years cannot do. Because if you ask me, these sectors are now saturated. But Nigeria has very huge prospects in the maritime sector. We are also looking at the maritime sector at the Institute. That is just one. I am sure that if we put together the necessary complements of experts, we will be able to identify these new areas, not just for Nigeria, but also for the whole of Africa. And then we can begin to now redefine the character and the nature of investments that we will be dealing with and engaging with going forward. Because I am sure, like I said before, that if we were to run with the traditional and conventional sectors, the rules of engagement will change very little. And we will be here again for the next 5, 6, 10 years talking about lack of progress in this area, lack of progress in the others. But these new sectors give us an opportunity to call the shot, so to speak.